So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got over 30 clips on a few different topics for what I think should be a really good show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with a little political comedy and along with my commentary between the clips. And as usual, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news shows on the regular Big Five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. And I'll also have a few of those quasi-news political comedy clips from Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. I'll be showing a quick clip from Bill Maher's new rules on marijuana candy at the end. And before that, I'll show several clips on Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor's loss in a primary to a Tea Party candidate. But first, I'll devote most of tonight's clips to the big breaking story during the last week, the civil war that seems to be forming in Iraq. And the first clip I want to show on that is from Bill Maher's monologue on Friday night, talking about the surprise and speed in a joke that I thought some of my European viewers might enjoy over in this clip.
In one city this week, this is true. 800, just 800 rebels scared off 30,000 Iraqi troops who took off the uniforms and threw down their guns. Even the French were like, what?
So yeah, there is Bill Maher making fun of the Iraqi army for folding so quickly. There is, I think it was Mosul, where 800 insurgent Al-Qaeda and Sunni Muslim minority troops from Iraq took over from these 30,000. It was 800 fighters versus 30,000 army soldiers who just like dropped their weapons and took off their uniforms and left. And it looked like they might actually take Baghdad, although I'm going to show now a clip. This is from Richard Engel on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking about why it looks like they're not going to take Baghdad, at least not immediately, over in this clip.
As David, just yesterday there were fears across this country that Baghdad could fall, that these Sunni extremists could enter the city and perhaps even take it, collapse the government. Now we're seeing the Iraqi army starting to mobilize. Also critically, we're starting to see these Shiite militias take to the streets. Just as ISIS, the militant group, initially surprised the government with its rapid advance, I think now the militants are equally surprised that the Shiites have found their footing. It doesn't seem at this stage that Baghdad is going to fall imminently. Instead, it looks like we're heading into a long sectarian fight.
The advance of Sunni fanatics from ISIS, an al-Qaeda offshoot, has stalled outside of Baghdad as Shiite militias are preparing to confront them. Called to arms by their clerics, an all-out sectarian war could be approaching.
As David, just yesterday they were...
So yeah, there you can see I have my clips looping. I didn't have time to unloop them. Maybe I'll try to do that while the clips are playing here. Sorry about that. But I want to show first a couple of the other news reports from the reporters in the corporate media on what's going on in Iraq. That was Richard Engel from ABC. This is Clarissa Ward from CBS. She talked about the same facts, but instead of saying that it looks like things are getting better with a better response from the Iraqi government, she seemed to think things were getting worse and worse, although based on saying the same things that were happening, as you can see over in this clip.
Bob, well, the situation here continues to get worse and worse. This morning, a suicide bomber attacked a location where Iraqi soldiers go to buy their uniforms. We're hearing reports that at least 12 people were killed in that attack. Meanwhile, the Iraqi security forces do appear to be preparing some type of a counter-offensive. The Iraqi army and Shiite militias are assembling now in the city of Samarra, north of Baghdad, which is home to one of the holiest Shiite shrines. And while the U.S. is reluctant to get involved militarily,
your best information, the situation on the ground right
well,
now.
the situation here continues to get worse and worse. This morning, a suicide bomber attacked a location where Iraqi soldiers go to buy their uniforms. We're hearing reports that at least 12 people were killed in that attack. Meanwhile, the Iraqi security forces do appear to be preparing some type of a counter-offensive. The Iraqi army and Shiite militias are assembling now in the city of Samarra, north of Baghdad, which is home to one of the holiest Shiite shrines. And while the U.S. is reluctant to get involved militarily here, Iran has no such qualms. They are throwing their support solidly behind the Shiite-dominated government of Nouri al-Maliki. CBS News can confirm that the head of the Quds Iranian paramilitary force, Qasem Soleimani, is here in Baghdad along with a contingent of Iranian fighters.
So yeah, that's Clarissa Ward saying things are getting worse and worse, and I was trying to fix the looping part of the clips while that clip was playing, and it kind of messed up the clip, so I guess I won't be doing that again. I'll just have to make sure I get them when they stop so they don't loop to the beginning. And I want to show one more clip from Clarissa Ward talking about how it looks like Iraq might break apart, which some people predicted a long time ago. I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip here.
That is what's so desperately scary. And when you talk to Iraqis and to politicians here, all of them have the same fears, whether they're Sunnis or Shiites. They fear that this country is breaking apart in a way that is irretrievable. And of course, that's particularly frightening because it's a conflict that really threatens to consume the entire region. We could literally see all of the borders of this region be redrawn around sectarian lines.
In one city this week, this is true. 800, just 800.
Sorry about that. I was replaying the first clip there by mistake. A little click error. Seems to be fraught with errors on my Father's Day edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. It ended up with a late start and all, and hopefully I'll get things back under control here. The next clip I want to show is also a reporter for Face the Nation, CBS reporter. That was Clarissa Ward. This is Lara Logan, who's a reporter for 60 Minutes. And she has a lot of experience in the Middle East and in Iraq. And she had some really good insight into who is the leadership of this, the insurgency force, what they're calling ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Some people call it ISIL, which is Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which is where Syria is. So Lara Logan was responding to a question as to who were the leadership, why are they being so successful, and I thought it was pretty insightful, as I'll talk about a little more after I show that clip here.
It's a very good question, Bob, because the leader of ISIS is seen as the poet and the philosopher and the spiritual man. He's the one driving the vision of the state and governance that they want to institute. But on the other side of that are the military masterminds, and there are a number of them. But among them, there's the war minister, who's believed to be a Moroccan, who we hear very little from, who's believed to be very powerful. And then one of the others is a man known as Abu Ayman al-Iraqi, who was held by the Americans in Camp Bucca in Iraq, and when he was released, went over to Syria with the blessing of Assad, but in Syria has become a powerful force for ISIS. He's known as the Prince of Latakia over there, and he's believed to be recruiting people from Syrian intelligence, Syrian military officers. They've done that on the Iraqi side of the border as well, and they've created a structure that truly understands military movement on the battlefield, and not only how to take territory, but how to hold it and defend it.
And he's a former member of Saddam Hussein's army.
And many of his underlings are former members. There are commanders, generals, intelligence officers. That's why the U.S. military, both civilian and military intelligence sources, regard this as so troubling. Because once you put people in the fight who know, for example, the weapons that they've been seizing, if you're just using them tactically or here and there randomly, that gives you something of an edge, but not much. What happens now if you know how to use them strategically, how to employ them across, both in Syria and in Iraq, use those assets to change the outcome of the war?
So yeah, there you can see that you've got these experienced Al-Qaeda insurgents who are teaming up with experienced military officers, both from the old Saddam Hussein Ba'athist army, and also from some people from Syria who are no longer with Assad. And so it's created a lot of the military success they're having has to do with some of the new people they put in there, and the combination of all these people who are really created, strategy as well as the insurgent tactics. And one of the things that was most disturbing about Lara Logan's analysis is the clip I'm going to show next, where she talked about some of the weapons that they've been getting, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip here.
A little bit about that, because I think what they've gotten over 100 tanks now.
Well, in its official list, the U.S. didn't leave behind any tanks. They left behind armored personnel carriers. They left behind 50 Stryker assault vehicles. But what they left behind as well, Bob, which is particularly significant, is Stinger missiles. And that's the best that we have to bring down aircraft in the skies. All of these other assets, heavy weapons, armored vehicles.
Talks, as he did, and you heard the clip, and he talked about it a lot on Friday about
the capability of what your ground forces can do. But the U.S. has maintained dominance because of its dominance of the skies. If you now remove your dominance of the skies, or you make it much more difficult to fight, you've taken away significant advantage that the U.S. has, and you've significantly changed the dynamics of what we face. So if you've got hundreds of Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, plus you have Apache helicopters. The Iraqis have got some. They've asked for more that haven't arrived yet. And F-16s, they already have some from before, and they've asked for another, batch that is still on its way. But those are the kind of weapons that we must be hoping the Iraqis have still held on to. We don't know exactly how much these guys have taken. There are reports this morning that the military base in Bakuba was taken. Well, that wouldn't be good at all. But you have to think that the most significant weapons, we have to hope, are in Baghdad and still in Iraqi government hands.
Laura, thank you. A little bit about that, because
So, yeah, that was a little bit disturbing, thinking of what weapons might be in the hands of al-Qaeda terrorists and this whole ISIS group. And sorry, I was trying to fix some of the clips there before I got to some of the clips that are coming up, and I guess I ended up playing a Fox News Sunday clip in the middle there. Actually, the next clip I'm going to play is from Fox News Sunday. It's Representative Mike Rogers, chair of the House Intelligence Committee. He was also talking about this ISIS force in Iraq, and he seemed to think that the fact that they hadn't taken Baghdad wasn't because of a counteroffensive by the Iraqi government and the Shia militias, but because they had gotten smart and they were just trying to consolidate their gains. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip here.
your best information, the situation on the ground right now. Is ISIS continuing to advance? Have the Shiite militias that have been called by the Grand Ayatollah Sistani to fight a holy war against the Sunnis, have they been able to blunt their advance? Is Baghdad vulnerable or not?
I think Baghdad is vulnerable. The problem is, this is what's most interesting in this, it appears that they've halted their attack on Baghdad, and now are trying, they being ISIS, now are trying to consolidate their wins in Mosul and Tikrit and other places, build in their defenses. But they're doing it by sheer terror, by the way. Summary executions, they've already implemented Sharia law, told women don't come out of your houses, all of that through fear. So it's interesting that they would stop and rebuild like you would watch a normal army do when you get that far stretched thin with your logistical base. So either A, they ran out of fuel and equipment, which we don't think they did, or B, more concerning is they started thinking about the ramifications of getting bogged down into a fight inside the city of Baghdad because these Shia militias are going to protect their home turf. That is an interesting development, and even more concerning if you think that they have learned from their past mistakes about overreaching.
So yeah, there is Representative Mike Rogers, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican, talking about how he also thinks that maybe this ISIS group is becoming a more experienced military strategic force, because he's talking about how the reason they stopped before Baghdad isn't because they ran out of weapons or fuel, but because they've learned from past mistakes and they're engaging in, a good military strategy. And that kind of, I thought, jibed with what Lara Logan was saying on Face the Nation about how there are these experienced military officers who are part of this force, and that's what makes them so formidable. And why they've been so successful. Now, of course, over on Fox News Sunday, they had Representative Mike Rogers. He's going to be one of many Republicans who I'm going to show this morning, blaming this whole thing on President Obama. And of course, on Fox News Sunday, the host Chris Wallace kind of teed him up on a couple different questions. Here you can see Chris Wallace teeing up Representative Mike Rogers on President Obama's failure of leadership, and he even shows a clip of President Obama and says, "Are the conditions he's setting? Is that like a recipe for failure?" That's not the exact words he uses, but you can see it's quite a setup for Obama bashing over on Fox News Sunday, as you might expect over in this clip.
President Obama said Friday that he intends to review military options for, quote, several days before deciding what to do, and then he says it's contingent on Prime Minister Maliki reaching out to the other sectarian factions inside Iraq. Let's watch.
The United States is not simply going to involve itself in a military action in the absence of a political plan by the Iraqis that gives us some assurance that they're prepared to work together.
With ISIS moving so fast, do we have several days for him to review options? And he said basically it was contingent on Maliki reaching out. If Maliki does not reach out to the Kurds and to the Sunnis and decides to stick with the Shia base, what does the U.S. do then?
Well, again, leadership is important. Absence of leadership and decisiveness is important in this. It's too late to have long political reconciliation meetings that will last weeks or months to try to get through even the finest points of difference. You have an al-Qaeda army on the move. This isn't just Sunnis versus Shias. This is an al-Qaeda-minded group that is using all of the tactics of brutality to subdue Mosul and to Tikrit and other places. This is as dangerous as it gets. Why? We have thousands of Westerners and Americans in both eastern Syria and Iraq who have Western passports. This is like
you're talking about these are members of ISIS.
Well, they're showing up to fight extremists, and so some are
to fight with the extremists.
Exactly. Yeah. They're fighting with al-Nusra in Syria or ISIS, and they will go with winners. And so this is what's so dangerous. At some point, even ISIS was saying, and this has got into the dispute with al-Qaeda leadership, we want to do external operations. And by the way, we know we have these Westerners who have come to jihadist Disneyland in eastern Syria that we can further radicalize, train, and send back to Europe and send back to the United States. And that's significant, Chris, because we've had our first American used in a suicide bombing in Syria.
So yeah, you can see that Representative Mike Rogers didn't need that much encouragement to find a failure of President Obama's leadership. And Chris Wallace even came back to this same issue about how looking for a political solution is going to take too long, and this is President Obama's big mistake, and use that as the premise of a second question for Representative Mike Rogers on Fox News Sunday that you can see here.
The President talks, as he did, and you heard the clip, and he talked about it a lot on Friday about all of this being contingent on political reconciliation inside Iraq. Is that a condition, or is that an excuse not to act?
Well, it certainly appears to be an excuse. There's no way you're going to get reconciliation. The reason that Maliki is doing what he's doing is once the U.S. pulled out, he realized he didn't have many friends in the neighborhood, and he tried to consolidate his power with the Shias. Now, that was a mistake. We could debate that for years to come if that was a mistake. I do think it was a serious mistake, but we helped condition his behavior. Right now, the threat is to the United States and to our European allies and a rising al-Qaeda army. These are not monkey bar terrorists out in the desert somewhere planning some very low-level attack. These are sophisticated, command and controlled, seasoned combat veterans who understand the value of terrorism operations external to the region, meaning Europe and the United States. That is about as dangerous a recipe as you can put together. And for us to say, maybe somebody else needs to deal with that. We will deal with it. It's just a matter of what it looks like.
So yeah, there's Representative Mike Rogers again attacking the lack of leadership from the Obama administration. And I think the closest that Chris Wallace came to asking Mike Rogers a confrontational question was really asking him if we should get involved in this civil war. And one thing he never asked him was about the intelligence failure. I'm going to get to the intelligence failure, why the United States was so surprised by this fast-moving ISIS force taking over several cities in Iraq. And I thought it was kind of surprising that Chris Wallace didn't ask that question to Mike Rogers, because Mike Rogers, as I said, is chair of the House Intelligence Committee. But here's the closest to a confrontational question I could find in the Chris Wallace interview with Mike Rogers from Fox News Sunday this morning here.
Headlines, forgive me, leading from behind, if you will. Should the U.S. be directly involved? Should we be sending Tomahawk cruise missiles, jet fighters off our assets in the Persian Gulf?
Well, if we learn anything, you can't fire missiles and then turn around and come home. It has to be a coordinated effort. That's why you have to have the Arab League with you. They have the capability and special forces and other things to impact certain parts of the battlefield. We should use that. We should help them do that. And that does not mean U.S. troops on the ground. And yes, if airstrikes turn around the ability for an al-Qaeda army to march and gain more safe haven, remember, this is all to them about gaining safe haven, which puts them on the path to their caliphate.
So
that's exactly what
if that would make a difference.
If it would make a difference. And I think there are plans. We can't wait days and weeks and months to scratch our heads in some political reconciliation process. We have to ask one single question. Is al-Qaeda holding land the size of Indiana a problem for the United States? Well, it certainly was when they were in Afghanistan and had time to plan the 9/11 event. And I guarantee you this is a problem that we will have to face. And we're either going to face it in New York City or we're going to face it here. Now, again, doesn't mean troops, doesn't mean the same kind of fight. It does mean that you have to have a coordinated effort, but it has to be disruptive through tempo, meaning you can't fire and release. You have to fire and continue the pressure so that you can dismantle and empower other Arab militaries to be successful.
There's Representative Mike Rogers saying that this is a direct threat against the United States, this takeover of parts of Iraq by this ISIS group that's made up of Al-Qaeda and former Ba'athist people. And of course, he wasn't the only Republican to say that this morning, and it wasn't only on Fox News Sunday. Here's another Republican who is very militaristic when it comes to Muslims. Representative Peter King of New York was over on NBC's Meet the Press this morning, and he also was very certain that this ISIS group was going to attack the United States if given half a chance, a quarter chance, or any chance at all, as you can see over in this clip.
Look at this from the vantage point of a terrorist threat to the United States. Let's look at the map. First, the map of what we're talking about, Iraq and Syria. And then you look at this section in red, which is the approximate area of control of ISIS that extends beyond Iraq into Syria. This is a breeding ground for terrorists. Al-Qaeda, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, arguably more extreme, if that's possible, than Al-Qaeda, with the kind of fighters, 10,000 foreign fighters, with designs on attacking the United States. How do you view it, then, in terms of what we ought to do?
That is a very real concern. There's no doubt that ISIS looks upon itself as an Iraq-Syria power, and it definitely has targeted the United States going back to 2011, when it was just Al-Qaeda in Iraq, before the Syrian component had even kicked in. We captured a number of their operatives in the United States attempting to carry out an attack at Fort Knox. So clearly, if they can get this sanctuary in northeastern Syria, in Iraq, this makes it an ineffective, privileged sanctuary to attack the United States. Apart from the destabilization they can do throughout the Middle East, especially to countries such as Jordan and to Israel, and that also, of course, increases the power of Iran as far as being an influence in that region.
So the obvious.
So yeah, that's Representative Peter King of New York saying that yes. They are going to attack us, and not only are they going to attack us, they already tried to attack us, because there are former members of Al-Qaeda in Iraq who tried to attack us in Fort Knox. They had a plan to attack us in Fort Knox, and I had never heard that, and I tried to research it, and the closest I could find is that we let some former Iraqi fighters, insurgent fighters, got into the United States under refugee status, and a couple of them were found to be living in Kentucky, not far from Fort Knox. But I could not find any evidence that they were actually planning to attack Fort Knox. I'm not sure, but I think that may be the plot of the James Bond movie Goldfinger, but as far as I know, there's no non-fiction aspect to that story, at least that I could find. You If you're watching this, you can let me know. If you're watching this recorded show, you can put a link down in the comment section if you can find any evidence that there were Al-Qaeda members who are actually going to attack Fort Knox, not live near Fort Knox, were found to be like former anti-American fighters insurgent fighters in Iraq who lived near Fort Knox. But anyway, I could not back that up. But of course, Peter King and Mike Rogers were not the only Republicans who were blaming this whole Iraq thing on President Barack Obama's leadership or lack thereof. I also want to show a clip of Republican Mike McCaul, who is head of the Homeland Security Committee, basically said the same thing over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to ABC reporter Jonathan Karl here.
This is a crisis. It does recall a response, not going to Palm Springs for a fundraiser. I talked to Ambassador Crocker yesterday. He said that this is the greatest threat, national security threat, since 9/11. Al-Qaeda owns more territory, more resources, and what's happening in Iraq right now is really chaotic. I think what needs to be done, the White House called me and asked me for my advice. I would call the top team of commanders and diplomats who won this war, and I would get their advice as to what to do moving forward. But I can tell you, it's a president's inability to negotiate a status of forces agreement in Iraq, which has put us in this situation that we're in today.
So yeah, there it is. That's another Republican. There you can hear specifically blaming Barack Obama for failing to negotiate a status of forces agreement, and you'll hear that a couple places, and then I'll also hear a rebuttal from the guy who was National Security Advisor at the time that decision was made. But I want to show, I'm going through all the Republicans who were attacking Barack Obama as the reason for this problem in Iraq, so I have to get to, of course, Senator Lindsey Graham. He also had some very strong words for President Obama, I believe, something about stubborn-headed and delusional, and then he said, but that's the last negative thing I'm going to say, as you can see over in this clip.
Actually want to move forward. We were well on our way. The lack of a residual force, this stubborn-headed president we have, who thinks he knows better than everybody else, who withdrew troops and exposed this country to the inevitable, needs to change his policies quickly. If he does, we can still save this.
Stubborn-headed
Stubborn-headed, delusional, detached president. But that's the last bad thing I'm going to say. Mr. President, a lot of people want to help you because we're in it together. The number of people that could die in this country from getting this wrong is going to be far greater than 4,000 because they're getting weapons they didn't have before. The economic chaos to the world is going to be far greater than this, and the money we spent in saving Iraq. This is another 9/11 in the making. The FBI director has warned us in Congress that Syria and Iraq present a direct threat to our homeland. You got foreign fighters from America and Western Europe occupying this battle space. They're operating with impunity. Get into the game, Mr. President. Leaders are judged not by the fact that they never make a mistake, but how they adjust to their mistakes. Bush made plenty of mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. Obama's made plenty of mistakes, but we have an opportunity, and time is running out, to turn this around. Get involved with air power, stop the march toward Baghdad, deal with Syria, but get a new government in place as quickly as you can that will bring the Iraqis back together for a counteroffensive.
Senator,
If we don't, God help us, because we're next.
So yeah, there you can see again another Republican putting forth the specter of an attack on the United States based on all this, and I want to show a little more of what Lindsey Graham said as the three things that got us here, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip here.
Three things have happened in 2010 and 11 to create this. How did we get here should be the question. Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the predecessor to ISIS, was on their back, just about gone. Syria blows up. They get reinforcements from Syria into Iraq. Maliki withdraws from the coalition. He becomes a sectarian leader. Obama's administration completely hands off, and we withdraw troops in 2011. That's the perfect storm.
But whose fault was that?
Yeah, I hate that perfect storm metaphor. I think it's really overused, and to show that it's overused, you can see Lindsey Graham say the same thing on Face the Nation, where he says all of the above, perfect storm, and throws in a little 9/11 again over in this last Lindsey Graham Iraq clip for the show here.
Was the administration asleep at the wheel? Was there an intelligence failure? Was this the fault of Maliki in Iraq? How did this happen?
Kind of all of the above. You go back to 2010 and 2011, the perfect storm. We withdraw our forces in 2011, so the security environment falls apart. Maliki, without hand-holding, being pushed by Petraeus and Crocker, the Obama administration had a hands-off approach to the political problems in Baghdad and Syria, got al-Qaeda in Iraq back into the game. We had al-Qaeda in Iraq, which is the predecessor to ISIS, on their backs, and when Syria went bad, they got reinforcements from Syria. So all this came together, and Maliki's a flawed leader, Bob. He has to go. There's no way that Maliki can bring this country back together.
So you think he has to resign?
Absolutely. I've been there so many times I can't count. And after we basically detached ourselves from Iraq, you know, Petraeus and Crocker would go into his office almost every day. I was there with them a lot, pushing all three parties. What's so heartbreaking is that we had this place in a good spot. They were playing politics rather than killing each other. The decision to withdraw U.S. forces created a vacuum. Syria is a launching pad, and it's all come together. We need air power immediately to stop the advance toward Baghdad. If the central government in Iraq collapses, and that's the goal of ISIS, Iran will own the southern part of Iraq. That's where the Shias live. They can operate ISIS from Baghdad to Kurdistan all the way into Syria. They will eventually march on Jordan and Lebanon. Our best ally in the region is the King of Jordan, and they will attack us from that part of Iraq and Syria, according to our own national director of national intelligence, FBI director. The next 9/11 is coming from here.
Was the administration asleep?
So yeah, there you can. Sorry about that looping. Yeah, you can see Lindsey Graham there is again blaming it all on the Obama administration and throwing in the 9/11 that I talked about. And I want to show a clip from Face the Nation where Tom Donilon, the guy who was national security advisor at the time the Obama administration didn't get a status of forces agreement with Iraq and decided to withdraw all troops. He talked about why that happened, and here's his rebuttal to all these Republicans who are saying that President Obama's lack of leadership in getting a status of forces agreement is what caused all this. So yeah, the Tom Donilon response is clip number 15 right here.
I think what happened is this, and think back, all right? At the end of December 2011, the United States withdrew its forces. That had been, though, after 8.5 years of working in Iraq. We tried to get a status of forces agreement, that is an agreement by the Iraqi government to provide the protections to our soldiers needed if we were going to stay, and they wouldn't provide it. And indeed, if you think about the situation at that point, that what they were telling us is they politically couldn't provided.
Well, let me just interrupt you there so people will understand. The status of forces agreement is something that says, well, for example, if an American soldier is arrested or becomes a captive of the Israeli government, they can take him into court, they can try him, that we have no jurisdiction. We have never left troops in a country without that kind of agreement, at least not in modern times.
That's exactly right.
As far as I can remember.
That's exactly right,
I guess what some people are saying, should we have tried harder to get that status of forces agreement? Because some are saying, as you well know, the president is looking for an excuse to get out of there.
No, we offered a status of forces agreement, and you're exactly right. Our presidents, our military leadership are not going to allow our armed forces to operate in an environment like that anywhere in the world without having the appropriate protections. And that wasn't forthcoming. And indeed, the politics in Iraq at that point wouldn't allow it to be forthcoming, is my own personal judgment. Now, it's also, by the way, been 2.5 years since December 31st, 2011, where the Iraqi government was given the space and time to put together the kind of inclusive government and to deal with a number of these issues, and it failed to do so. So you've had 8.5 years up until that point, 2.5 years since then. We have been engaged in trying to support the Iraqis in this counterterrorism fight against this ISIS group. They resisted by the way, our getting involved deeply in their security issues up until about a year ago, when this problem obviously stared them in the face and they saw that they needed help.
So yeah, there's Tom Donilon, who was national security advisor at the time the Obama administration decided to withdraw from Iraq without leaving any troops because they couldn't get the status of forces agreement. And everyone agrees you can't leave, or I guess Democrats and Republicans both agree you can't leave forces in a country without a status of forces agreement. That's what he was saying at the beginning. And then he said that Maliki, Prime Minister Maliki of Iraq, refused to sign the status of forces agreement, and he believed politically he couldn't get it past the parliament. And I'm going to show a clip of Lindsey Graham. I guess there is one more Lindsey Graham Iraq clip I forgot about, where he's over on CNN State of the Union, and I believe it's Gloria Borger from CNN, formerly of CBS, confronts him with this idea that it's Maliki's fault, and he says, no, it's our fault because we wanted him to get it past the parliament, which I don't even understand. How could you have a status of forces agreement without it getting past the parliament? That seems like it doesn't even fit with the kind of democracy we were supposedly trying to set up. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip here.
The perfect storm.
But whose fault was that? I mean,
That's President Obama's fault.
Why is that President Obama's fault? Maliki didn't want to leave a residual force.
No, that's
there?
not true. That is absolutely a lie. I was there on the ground at the request of Secretary Clinton. Maliki, Barzani, and the Sunnis were willing to accept an American force. We wanted the agreement to go through Parliament, which would have been a disaster. They got what they wanted. The Obama administration wanted to say, I ended the war in Iraq, I'm going to end the war in Afghanistan. This was as predictable as the sun rising in the east. I blame President Obama mightily for a hands-off policy when it comes to Iraq.
I think I could excerpt a little clip out of there if I wanted to, where I have Lindsey Graham saying it's as predictable as the sun rising in the east that I blame President Obama, which actually I think is the truest part of that clip there, because like I said, I think it is more the fault of the Iraqi government, and of course George W. Bush for going in and toppling Saddam Hussein and leaving this big power vacuum without a plan for how to bring the former a lot of the people in this ISIS group, like I was showing before, are former Iraqi military, like Ba'athist members of Saddam Hussein's military. And one of the first things that George W. Bush administration did after they toppled Saddam Hussein is they sent the military home instead of repurposing them for the new Iraq. And that's why a lot of those military officers joined the insurgency, and why they're now back in the insurgency, I guess. But I want to show a few clips. One of the senators who was also out there is Democratic Senator Joe Mancin, and he was over on, I believe it was on Meet the Press. Was it Meet the Press? Yeah, on Meet the Press, talking to David Gregory, and he also gave a pretty good defense of the Obama administration's decision to not leave troops because he couldn't get a status of forces agreement, which is really the fault of Prime Minister Maliki, as you can see over in this clip.
Suffering and lives that we've sacrificed, and the amount of resources we've put in there to let this thing become completely unstable and falling apart. And then they're the ones in 2011 that didn't that wouldn't sign, and now they're asking for our help again. Until they have the will to enter this fight, David, until they have the will to fight and die for their country, we're not going to be able to give them a backbone. They're going to have to stiffen up themselves.
So, Senator,
we've got to make sure that we have the proper intel and the support.
So, yeah, I like that clip from Senator Joe Manchin. He is a Democrat, but he's one of the most right-wing Democrats in the Senate, so I don't often agree with him, but I was glad to see him on Meet the Press standing up for the Obama administration policy in Iraq. And he also made the point on Meet the Press that it's not really lack of troops or money that caused this problem, because we put in huge amounts of troops and money for many years, and if troops and money were to solve this problem, we would have solved it, as you can see him say over on NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
I think that basically we have to send a very clear signal. You intend to do America or any Americans harm, we will bring a ring of fire that you've never ever could have imagined upon you. But for us to go in and try to occupy and change the culture of these countries, we have not done a good job. We are not good at that. If it was military might or money that would change that part of the world, we'd have done it by now, David. And that's not going to happen. But make no mistake, you intend to do harm to America or Americans, we're going to come after you. we're going to bring a ring of fire on you. You hoped it never happened.
So yeah, I think that's also a good point from Democratic Senator Joe Manchin on Meet the Press about how this is not a problem that could be solved with troops or with money, because if it could be, then the amount that we've spent would have solved it by now. And I didn't have time for the live show, but if this is a recorded show, you will be able to see down in the video description a link to a video I made back in January 2007. I think it's called Should U.S. Just Threaten to Get Out of Iraq? I was watching it earlier today. It's kind of funny because there's a screenshot of the January 2007 YouTube video player page, which looks so different. And I basically talked about how the real solution, we needed to withdraw in such a way that we set up a regional conference to redraw the map along ethnic lines, which, that's one of the big problems here is the countries in the Middle East were drawn up by European powers at the end of World War I. It was like France and England had the Sykes-Picot Accord, where they set up their regions of influence and drew all the boundaries, and it was in violation of what should have been the American position was President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, and I make that point in my video about how Iraq should be split up, and maybe even the Middle East should be split up in a new way based on the the desires of the people who live there. And so I want to make that point, especially regarding the way it's breaking up now into these sort of ethnic and religious sectarian lines. But I do want to show one more clip from Senator Joe Manchin, where he makes another important point about all this, that the United States was really surprised by the speed of the takeover of cities by this ISIS group, and it was really a big intelligence failure. I said earlier that on Fox News Sunday they didn't ask about the intelligence failure, only about President Obama's failure, when they were talking to Representative Mike Rogers, who's actually chair of the House Intelligence Committee. And here is Senator Joe Manchin over on NBC's Meet the Press making the point that this is a big intelligence failure in this clip.
Well, first of all, David, I think our intelligence has failed us miserably for not being aware and not the threat that we faced and how this could unfold as quickly as it has. This has been planned for quite some time. My first thing to recommend to the President is get your intelligence group back on track, making sure that we have the intel that we need for our whatever options we have that are going to be accurate. There's no caveat for us whatsoever, and there's no will from the Senate that I detect, from Democrats or Republicans, to put boots on the ground. The President has confirmed that. I appreciate that.
Well, what
but the
would you
options that are
support
open
then?
is going to be airstrikes and using our technical support.
What specifically? Is it airstrikes?
I'm open to the airstrikes and technical support.
So I'm going to get to the airstrikes question in just a minute, but I thought it was kind of interesting that Senator Joe Manchin there blamed an intelligence failure, and one of the big pieces of evidence I saw in the Sunday morning news analysis shows this morning that there was an intelligence failure was one more, I forgot, there is one more Lindsey Graham Iraq clip, and there's actually going to be another Lindsey Graham clip when I get to the Eric Cantor lost to a Tea Party candidate topic in a minute. But here's Senator Lindsey Graham was over on CNN State of the Union, and he obviously is not getting briefed very well by U.S. intelligence about what's going on in Iraq, because he was in this strange situation where he asked the CNN reporter if he knew what was going on with the Iraqi Air Force and the use of Iraqi air power, as you can see over in this clip.
I'm going to ask Senator Graham, do you have a question you might want to ask Nick in Baghdad?
Yes, Nick, what's your information about the ability of the Iraqi Air Force to engage the enemy?
We don't have any accurate information about them. All I can say is I'm in Baghdad and I'm not hearing or seeing anything flying in the air here. What we do know is that ISIS have captured helicopters. They've got pilots from Saddam Hussein era army flying them for them now. They've co-opted part of the old Ba'athist army that we disbanded, essentially.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of weird where they had it's sort of like the reversal of roles where they had the politician asking the reporter a question, trying to find out information, which tells me that maybe U.S. intelligence doesn't have a lot of information if Senator Lindsey Graham hasn't been able to find out what's going on with the Iraqi Air Force there. On the whole issue of airstrikes, I thought one of the most interesting exchanges was also over on CNN's State of the Union. They had on two congresspeople who were also Iraq war veterans, one Republican, Adam Kinzinger, and then also this Democrat from Hawaii, I've had her on once before, Tulsi Gabbard is her name. And you can see them arguing both for and against the use of U.S. airstrikes in the conflict based on their personal experience as Iraq war veterans in this final clip on the topic of what's going on in Iraq from this morning here.
But Congressman, what do you say to your constituents who are so war-weary? You know, 2/3 of the American public believes it was a mistake to have been in Iraq, that we got nothing out of it. Now we're talking about going back. What do you say to them?
Well, look, the American people have a right to be war-weary. American leadership does not. Leadership is about doing the right thing, even if it's tough. I'm glad that Truman at the end of World War II didn't say America.
You certainly looked stunned. Did this completely shock you?
Absolutely, Jonathan. I don't think anybody in the country thought that the outcome would be what it was.
But Congressman, what do you say to your constituents who are so war-weary? You know, 2/3 of the American public believes it was a mistake to have been in Iraq, that we got nothing out of it. Now we're talking about going back. What do you say to them?
Well, look, the American people have a right to be war-weary. American leadership does not. Leadership is about doing the right thing, even if it's tough. I'm glad that Truman at the end of World War II didn't say America's too war-weary, we can't leave a residual force in Europe, because Russia would be twice as big as it is today. The point of leadership is leading a war-weary public to the point of saying this is in national interest, we have to do it, not standing in front of people and saying, I know you're tired, I know you're tired. It's standing in front of people and saying, I know you're tired, but we have to prevent a caliphate by ISIS from being established.
Congressman Kinzinger, Congresswoman, go ahead, real fast.
Taking that action, taking military action, conducting airstrikes, dropping bombs based on poor intelligence without having real-time intelligence and boots on the ground that can provide that, taking sides in this religious civil war not only is not in the best U.S. national interest, it doesn't even solve the problem of what is existing there. If we want to take action, we should push for brokering. We should push for brokering a peaceful agreement between these warring factions within the country and support leadership in Iraq that's willing to do that.
So yeah, I thought that was an interesting conversation between a Democratic Iraq war veteran in Congress and a Republican Iraq war veteran in Congress. So, and thank you for the person who left the comment for me to turn my mic up. I've been fiddling with the volume controls because I'm trying a new way to equalize everything, and I don't think it's working very well. But what was it? One of the things, even if I don't get to the comments at the end, for a live discussion, I do read the comments while the clips are playing, and I appreciate Steve Enever telling me to turn my mic up for a little audio feedback there. So those are all the clips I want to show on the breaking news for this last week with the big insurgency in Iraq, or the Al-Qaeda, Ba'athist, ISIS group that's been taking over cities in Iraq. The next topic I want to show several clips on is another big surprise that happened this last week. The Republican House Majority Leader Eric Cantor lost his primary election to this Tea Party guy, David Bratt, who's like this college professor who nobody thought would win. And first I want to show a clip. This is Eric Cantor over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, admitting that he was surprised by the outcome he was surprised on election night talking to Jonathan Karl over here.
You certainly looked stunned. Did this completely shock you?
Absolutely, Jonathan. I don't think anybody in the country thought that the outcome would be what it was. And, you know, I just am a believer, as I said that night and subsequently, that, you know, there's some things that happen for a reason, and we may not be able to really discern it now. And given the perspective of time, I think we're going to be able to look back at this, and what seemed really bad at the time may turn out to be really good.
Your pollster, John McLaughlin, had you up 34 points. You paid him, what, $75,000? Are you expecting a refund? I mean, what happened there?
Now, listen, I know there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of polls being done to sort of dissect what happened. And, you know, frankly, that's really not what I am focused on now. And in fact, I want to take what I've been doing here and the experience and privilege I've had of representing the people of the 7th District of Virginia and be able to really look towards the future so I can really continue to promote and be a champion for the conservative cause.
Well, I want to get...
So yeah, you can see there that Eric Cantor didn't really, I mean, he did say he was surprised, but a lot of questions, and I'm going to show several clips from Eric Cantor on a few different programs where he didn't really answer many questions, but he did react to a question that Jonathan Karl asked him about being attacked by a right-wing columnist and Fox News contributor Lara Ingraham, who actually made this joke that he should be traded to the Taliban, which for Bo Bergdahl, POW Bo Bergdahl. They didn't show that clip, but they did show another clip of Lara Ingraham attacking him, and then got Eric Cantor's response. As you can see, this is Jonathan Karl again on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos over in this clip.
He wasn't coming clean on what his real views on immigration were, and I think people understood that in the end. And well, they saw a phony, and he came across as a phony. I mean, I'm sorry, but he came across very two-faced on that issue.
So, I mean, she even suggested you should be traded to the Taliban, you know, somewhat of a joke. Did she cross the line? Do you blame her for the loss here?
Listen, I'm not into blaming anybody, but I will say that suggestion that I should have been traded to the Taliban for Sergeant Bergdahl really is not a serious contribution to any public policy debate. And frankly, I don't think that it reflects on the people who self-identify as Tea Partiers. I think they reject that kind of notion, and it's just not serious, and frankly, it cheapens the debate.
So I guess that Eric Cantor was kind of miffed about that comment from Lara Ingraham, because he actually gave a response to that. There were a lot of questions that he didn't respond to. One over on CNN, Dana Bash asked him about this theory from his pollster. You know, his pollster had told him he was going to win by like double digits, and he ended up losing by double digits, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. And so Dana Bash asked about that and about a statement from his pollster saying that the reason was that a bunch of Democrats came and voted in the primary to mess things up. And you can see how Eric Cantor refused to speculate about that possibility over in this clip.
Your pollster had you up 34 points. You ended up losing by 12 points. Now, he sent us a memo overnight arguing that the role of religion. You are a Jewish Republican. Your pollster had you up 34 Jewish Republican in the House. You started your discussion after you lost, quoting the Old Testament, talking about your Jewish faith. Your pollster had you up 34 points. Your district is 0.25% Jewish, and your opponent, David Bratt, really put his Christian faith front and center.
Sorry, that was like trying to get the clips to work right. Anyway, I'm sorry I went through two different clips there at the same time, but here is that clip of Eric Cantor responding to claims that Democrats lost him the primary election over in this clip.
Your pollster had you up 34 points. You ended up losing by 12 points. Now, he sent us a memo.
You do right that Eric Cantor did wrong.
I think I defined myself in a very good way.
Your pollster had you up 34 points. You ended up losing by 12 points. Now, he sent us a memo overnight arguing that he thinks it's that Democrats voted in your Republican primary, which is allowed in Virginia. Let me just read you a quote. He said, "The untold story is who were the new 19,000 new primary voters. They aren't Republicans. Certainly the extra voter surge of non-Republican primary voters seriously hurt." Do you think that Democrats came out for some mischief and voted you out?
You know, Dana, I don't think it's really worthwhile. I know there's going to be a lot of people and pollsters and analysts.
Paul. You're such a Paul. I'm sure you're thinking about it.
No, I'm not, because I'm looking forward. You know, and I think, again, a lot of folks are going to be interested in that. But to me, you know, the problems that people are facing in this country are a lot greater than any kind of setback, political setback, personal setback I've got. So I really am very focused on continuing on the mission that I've tried to be about here in Washington. It's those reform conservative solutions that actually can be applied to people's problems in the working middle class of this country, the poor, and for everyone.
So yeah, as you can see, Eric Cantor wouldn't answer that question about whether Democrats lost him the primary. And I'm sorry, I had a little bit of switchback there, but I'm trying to get the clips prepared while you're watching the clips, and it's like messing up the software because I was rushed and started late, and I apologize for that. But I also want to show you a clip of Eric Cantor refusing to answer a question about whether he thinks anti-Semitism lost him the election. You know, Eric Cantor was the only Jewish Republican in the Congress, so they're now every Republican is Christian. I think there's one African American who was appointed in the Senate. Other than that, they're all white Christians. And but Eric Cantor would not answer the question about whether anti-Semitism lost him the election, as you can see over in this clip.
The role of religion. You are a Jewish Republican, the only Jewish Republican in the House. You started your discussion after you lost, quoting the Old Testament, talking about your Jewish faith. Your district is 0.25% Jewish, and your opponent, David Bratt, really put his Christian faith front and center. I want you to listen to one of the things he said.
The miracle that just happened, this is a miracle from God that just happened. But that miracle did not just float down from heaven.
Do you think that there was anti-Semitism involved in your defeat?
Listen, I don't ever want to impute that to anybody. You know, as you rightly say, I'm born and raised Jewish. My faith is very important to me. You know, I know that I'm going to continue to try and work with the lessons that I've learned from my early years in Hebrew school, learning about the Old Testament and much greater leaders than I with personal setbacks. But always focused on being optimistic about the future. Our country has so much potential. You know, I believe that the Republican Party is one that taps into that innate potential.
So that, yeah, there is Representative Eric Cantor again, Cantor, not Cancer, not answering the question about whether he lost because of anti-Semitism. And I also want to show a clip from Senator Lindsey Graham, who also had a significant Tea Party challenge. He may have won because he had 6 Tea Party challengers instead of 1 Tea Party challenger like Eric Cantor did. But I'll show you, here's a clip of Lindsey Graham saying why it is that he did not lose when Eric Cantor did lose, answering a question from Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation over here.
About Republican politics right now, while the big story was Eric Cantor, the majority leader in the House, getting beat last week in a primary, you had an even stronger Tea Party force. You had an army. You had 4 or 5 of them running against you down in South Carolina. 6, actually, but who's counting, And you won. And you won by stressing that the Republican Party has to have some kind of path to citizenship for Hispanics, which was one of the big issues in his race. What, as a winner, what is your advice to your party this morning, Senator?
Number one, I don't think Eric got beat because of his stand on immigration. I think he got beat because of his lack of defining himself on immigration. I told the Republican Party at home that we're doing well because the Democrats are doing poorly. This ultra-liberal agenda of President Obama's blown up in their face. We're going to win in 2014. Conservative values will connect with Hispanics and African Americans. But don't be delusional about where we stand. If we become the party of self-deportation, if that again is our position in 2016, we're going to drive a deeper wedge between us and Hispanics. A pathway to citizenship. After you secure the border, control who gets a job, more legal immigration, where they have to pass their criminal background check, learn the English language, wait 10 years before you can apply for a green card, is 65% accepted in the state of South Carolina. Republicans nationally will accept an earned pathway to citizenship if you secure the border. For our party to let the 35% tell us how to engage with immigration, we will lose a natural ally in the Hispanic community. Bush was at 44. We're down to 27. You'll never convince me it's not because of the rhetoric around immigration. If you solve the immigration problem in a good American responsible way, our party's back in the game and we can dominate the 21st century. If we keep playing this game, that self-deportation is the only answer for the Republican Party, we will have destroyed our chances in 2016 and dealt a death blow to our party, because by 2050, the majority of this country is going to be African American, Hispanic, and Asian. Conservatism is the best hope for African American children in failing school. Conservatism aligns with Hispanics. They're hardworking, they're entrepreneurial, they're pro-life, they're pro-military. It will break my heart for my party to go down a road that we need not go. Embrace rational, comprehensive immigration reform that prevents a third wave of illegal immigration, and we're back in the ball game. If we don't adjust on this issue, our chances for survival as a party are very bleak, and the country needs a vibrant Republican Party, and our Democratic friends have put us back in the game. Let's take advantage of it.
So yeah, there's Senator Lindsey Graham saying that it wasn't immigration that lost Eric Cantor his re-election, which is what a lot of the pundits have been saying, that because that he was framed as pro-amnesty, because he said that maybe he came out for the Dreamers, the Dream Act, where the children who are brought here as children, through no fault of their own, and then grow up in the United States, even though they're not U.S. citizens, that they should have some sort of pathway to citizenship. And the next clip I'm going to show is actually Eric Cantor denying that it was his immigration stance that cost him the election, with kind of agreeing with Lindsey Graham there. And this is in response to a question from Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union over in this clip.
Immigration. A lot has been made about whether immigration played a role into this. What I want to know is, I actually have maybe a different take, is whether or not you supported and still support giving legal status to illegal immigrant children. And you sent some flyers out, and you made very clear politically, there you see it up there, that you think that it's amnesty and that you're against illegal immigration. Is part of the issue that maybe it was a little too wishy-washy and you didn't go all in?
Listen, my position on immigration has not changed. It was the way it is before the primary, during, and now. And I took a principled position. I've always said that I am not for a comprehensive amnesty bill, but I've always said that I was for the kids who, due to no fault of their own, find themselves here and know no other place is home. Now, I know that that can make a lot of people mad on both sides, but I do think it is the only plausible way forward in terms of immigration reform, that we focus on the things that we agree on, not that which we don't, and build the trust so that we can get something done. I've said this to the president. My colleagues are aware of my position. And again, it did, I'm sure, aggravate people on both sides of the issue, but it is the principal position that I've taken, and I believe it's the right one.
Important ones. Immigration. A lot has been...
So yeah, there you can see Eric Cantor claiming that he had a principled position on immigration, and that wasn't the reason why he lost. And but I'm going to show one of the last couple clips on the Eric Cantor thing is from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher talked about this in his monologue, and he talked about how it shows that the Republicans, how far right they really are. And then I'm going to show a clip of a Republican sort of responding, not to Bill Maher, but responding to that argument. But here, first, Bill Maher saying that Eric Cantor's defeat shows Republicans have to be way too far right over in this clip.
Okay, the other thing about this issue we should discuss.
Eric Cantor, I don't think anybody would doubt, was a pretty...
Because that was the wedge issue that apparently got Cantor unseated. And here's how much this party has gone off the rails on every issue, but especially this issue. All Cantor was saying was that he was going to vote for a bill that said if a child of illegals born in this country but from illegal parents got a 4.0 grade average and served in the military. How many people could this be, by the way? This needle that they have to thread, 4.0 and served in the military, they could be citizens. First of all, wouldn't these be great citizens?
Yes. Absolutely.
They would be.
Absolutely.
That was too much for the Tea Party. That's just hate. Virginia is for haters.
Okay. So yeah, I kind of agree with Bill Maher on that, although he misstated the issue because he said that these dreamers are actually born in the United States, because if they were born in the United States, they would be citizens, but they aren't. They're brought here as children. And but the last clip I want to show in the whole Eric Cantor loss to the Tea Party candidate is sort of a Tea Party or conservative Republican over on Fox News Sunday, I believe, yeah, talking about Chris Wallace asked him if the loss of Eric Cantor shows that the Republican Party is moving too far right, and this is Representative Greg Walden saying, no, that's not what it means in this clip.
Conservative member of Congress. In fact, he was seen as the member of leadership who was most open to listening and dealing with the concerns of the Tea Party faction inside Congress. Congressman Walden, Democrats say if Eric Cantor is too moderate for the Republican Party, that just shows that the Republican Party is outside the mainstream. How are you going to deal with that argument in November?
Chris, again, I want to get back to people are making all kinds of claims about what happened or didn't happen in this primary without actually realizing what the facts were on the ground. Every race is individualized, every race is specific, and every race is local. And you better do the research to figure out what really happened in this race before you draw these conclusions. And Democrats are trying to spin this every way they can at their peril, because what you have is conservatives at the grassroots level who are fired up like they were in 2010, and it's going to play out in the fall, and it's not going to be good for the Democrats.
Eric Cantor,
So yeah, there you can see the final clip on the whole Eric Cantor loss to a Tea Party candidate. Of course, there's still a general election coming up, as I saw someone mention in the comments while the clip was playing. And one of the funny things about this election is the person who beat Eric Cantor is a college professor in economics at this really small college there in Virginia, and the Democrat running against him is a college professor also at the same college. So that will be interesting, but it's a very Republican district, so it seems very unlikely that the Democrat will win just because of the number of people who are registered in each party, but I guess I have to wait and see. So those are all the clips on the Eric Cantor issue. So the final issue I wanted to talk about is it's a marijuana issue. I know my viewers are always interested in marijuana and marijuana legalization, and Bill Maher over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday showed several clips, or no, not showed clips, but did several new rules. One of his main new rule was on marijuana legalization, and he actually took a stance against a certain kind of legalized marijuana, which might be a surprise to some, as I'll discuss a little more after I show that final clip here.
Mostly, stop selling pot products that look like children's candy. That's not what stoners would do. That's what R.J. Reynolds would do. We don't want to market it to children, and I'm sure parents don't want their kids on pot. Adderall? Sure. Lithium, Lexapro, Klonopin, why not? Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, of course. But pot is the new kid. It has to play it safe. Let's not throw the baby out with the bong water. Mostly, stop.
So, I don't know. What do you think? First, I thought that Bill Maher was coming out against marijuana edibles that look like candies. But by the end of that clip, I thought maybe he was coming out against the hypocrisy of parents who are all worried about marijuana for their kids, but are happy to give their kids other drugs. And, of course, corporations that want to sell drugs like nicotine and tobacco to their kids. So, I don't know. I guess you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I way over time, and I started the show late, so I'm not going to have much time to look at the discussion section here. But I do see that I had well over 100 people watching for quite a long time, 115, 120. So I want to look here real quick. My dinner may be starting very soon, but let me see. As I said, I was looking at the comment section as I was going along. Oh yeah, people are talking about all the tech issues. There are a lot of people arguing with each other. I don't know, maybe it's just too much. Oh, now I'm getting like a error trying to look at the comments. So I guess this is going to be another week where I don't really get into the comment section, but I do want you to keep watching live. And like I said, I read your comments while the clips are playing, so I appreciate the time that you spent watching. And it seems like you're mostly arguing with each other, as often seems to be the case. I did say that I was working on a edited produced video, which got a little bit delayed because of some work I did personally on the immigration issue, which I uploaded a clip of that I think last Wednesday, but I haven't finished this Slender Man video about the Fox News coverage of the Slender Man stabbings in Wisconsin, but that video should be done sometime in the next few days. I will upload it after I upload the Monday clip. Let me know what you think the best clip of the week is for my Monday excerpt clip from Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I should hopefully be starting the show at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time as the regular time again next Sunday, and I hope I let you start your week a little bit more informed, or end your weekend based on the clips I showed you. I hope you appreciated the ones I picked out. And thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend here in North and South America, around the rest of the world. Enjoy the beginning of your week, and I guess I'll be seeing you all around the internet.